A Tuesday afternoon, March 23, 2004. La Porcella Italian restaurant in Carlton, Melbourne. White tablecloths, the smell of garlic and olive oil. The kind of place where men sit for long lunches and speak quietly about things that will not appear in any meeting minutes. Two men are eating together. One of them is a suspected hitman, linked by Victoria Police to between 6 and 8 murders during the bloodiest chapter of Melbourne's underworld history. The other describes himself as a mediator, a businessman, a man who resolves disputes so other men do not have to. Somewhere between the entree and what would have been dessert, a gun appears. 2 shots fired. The suspected hitman is dead on the floor of the restaurant. The other man calls police himself. He tells them it was self-defense. 18 months later, a jury agrees. He walks out of court free. And that single Tuesday afternoon in a Carlton restaurant becomes the moment that defines everything that follows. His name is Mick Gatto, known as Mick, and the question his story raises, the one that a jury answered one way and that Melbourne has been debating ever since, is whether what happened that afternoon was survival or something else entirely. Thank you for watching our video. Don't forget to hit subscribe to support us. That single tap is what keeps us going and gives us the motivation to keep making the next one. Now, let's go back to where this man comes from. Mick Gatto was born in Melbourne on 6th of August 1955 into an Italian-Australian family. He started working in the fruit and vegetable markets, the kind of early morning physical work that builds both muscle and the specific social intelligence that comes from negotiating prices before the city wakes up. He boxed. He developed the physical presence and the public persona that would follow him across every subsequent chapter of his life, through underground gambling operations in the 1980s, through the construction industry disputes of the 1990s, and eventually through the Melbourne Gangland killings that claimed more than 30 lives between 1998 and 2010. Early convictions, burglary, assaulting police, illegal gambling, date to the 1970s and 1980s. Nothing after that has resulted in a conviction. He describes himself as a mediator and arbitrator, a man people call when a problem needs resolving and the usual channels are either too slow or too visible. A federal judge described him differently, as a standover man and a gangster closely associated with a number of violent and dangerous criminals in Melbourne. Both descriptions are in the public record, both are attributed to real people. Neither cancels the other. To understand what happened at La Porcella, you need to understand who Andrew Veniamin was. Born in Sunshine, Victoria in 1975, known as Benji, by the time he died at 28 years old, Victoria Police had connected him to multiple underworld murders during the Gangland War. He was Carl Williams's enforcer, the man Williams deployed when precision was required. A short fuse and a growing kill count described in this series' earlier coverage of the Williams story. By March 2004, Veniamin was one of the most dangerous men connected to Melbourne's criminal landscape. And on the 23rd of March 2004, he was sitting across a table from Mick Gatto at a Carlton restaurant. What they were discussing, what the conversation contained before it became a crime scene, is known only through one account: Mick Gatto's. And Gatto says that at some point during that meal, Veniamin pulled a .38 handgun and threatened to kill him. That Gatto managed to turn the weapon during a struggle, that he fired 1 shot into Veniamin's neck and 1 into his eye, that the man who had allegedly killed 6 to 8 people was going to kill him next, and didn't. Gatto called police himself after the shooting. He told them it was self-defense. He was charged with murder. He spent 18 months on remand. And then, in 2005, a jury heard both sides of that account. They returned a verdict of not guilty. The trial of Mick Gatto opened on 28 April 2005 in the Victorian Supreme Court before Justice Philip Cummins. It ran for 7 weeks. The prosecution argued Gatto had premeditated the killing, that he produced the .38 revolver himself, that the framing of self-defense was constructed after the fact to explain an execution carried out in the middle of a gangland war. Gatto testified that Veniamin drew the gun first, that during the struggle, Veniamin implicated himself in the deaths of Dino Dibra, Paul Kalapolitis, and Graham Kinnebra. That by the time Gatto fired, it was him or Benji. The jury deliberated. They returned a verdict of not guilty. Gatto walked out of court. He had spent 18 months behind bars waiting for that verdict. And what he walked out into? A Melbourne still in the middle of its deadliest underworld chapter, was the landscape that would define the rest of his public life. Not as a convicted criminal, as the man who killed the most feared hitman in Melbourne's Gangland history, and was found to have done it lawfully. After the acquittal, Mick Gatto does something that almost no figure connected to the Melbourne Gangland killings manages to do. He pivots into business, into the construction industry, into the specific role of mediator and dispute resolver that would become his public identity for the next 2 decades. His own description of the work is precise. He is someone capable of settling difficult disagreements without lengthy legal battles. His communication skills, his network, his reputation, all applied to resolving problems between contractors, unions, and developers in Victoria's construction sector. A report commissioned by CFMEU Administrator Mark Irving KC in 2026 describes something different. It describes what the report calls Gatto's extortion model, where he would contact contractors and tell them he could stop work at a site at a moment's notice unless he was paid a fee. Gatto denies it. "The big build has never paid me a penny," he tells 10 News in February 2026. "The government has never paid me a penny. The unions have never paid me a penny. Both accounts sit in the public record." The jury in 2005 resolved the question about March 2004. Nobody has resolved the question about everything that came after. June 2026. Detectives raid a beachside property in Mount Martha, roughly 50 kilometres southeast of Melbourne. 2 people in their 70s are arrested. One of them is Mick Gatto. Police seize electronic devices and controlled weapons. Gatto is taken in. Then, later that afternoon, he arrives back at his home escorted by an unmarked police car. He opens the gate himself. He is released without charge. The investigation, described as an ongoing probe into alleged financial crimes and criminal behaviour in the construction industry, continues. Gatto had already been suing the ABC for defamation over a 2019 article, he argued, implied he was a hitman who had plotted a murder and threatened to kill lawyer-turned-police informer Nicola Gobbo. He told the Supreme Court the article was particularly harmful and hurtful because he had been accused of murder in the past and was acquitted. The ABC argued the article was a fair and accurate report of court proceedings. That case, like so many things connected to Mick Gatto's name, produced no clean resolution. He has a Google alert for his own name. He told the court he is a self-described veteran of Melbourne's Underworld. At 70 years old, he is still one of the most debated figures in Australian crime history. And he is still free. Dominic Gatto, born Melbourne 6 August 1955. Early convictions: burglary, assaulting police, illegal gambling, 1970s and 1980s. No subsequent convictions on the formal record. 2004. Gaming ban issued, later extended to a lifetime ban from Crown Casino. 23 March 2004. Shoots and kills Andrew Veniamin at La Porchella restaurant, Carlton. Claims self-defense. Charged with murder. 18 months on remand. 2005. Found not guilty by jury. Acquitted on self-defense grounds. Post-acquittal, moves into construction industry mediation and dispute resolution. Named in multiple investigations and inquiries, never charged in connection with those matters. 2019. Sues ABC for defamation over article linking him to murders and threats. Case proceeds through courts. 2026. Arrested at Mount Martha property as part of financial crimes investigation into construction industry. Released without charge. Devices and weapons seized. Investigation ongoing. Age 70 as of July 2026. There is a photograph of Mick Gatto that has appeared across decades of Australian crime coverage. Big man, easy smile, the kind of presence that fills a room without effort. It is the same face that sat in the dock at the Victorian Supreme Court for 7 weeks in 2005. The same face that walked out of that court acquitted. The same face that arrived home from Mount Martha in June 2026, escorted by an unmarked police car and opened his own gate. At 70 years old, still free, still debated, still the subject of a Google alert he monitors himself. The first question his story raises is specific. A jury found that shooting Andrew Veniamin, a man linked to 6 to 8 murders, constituted lawful self-defense. That finding is established. What has never been established is the fuller picture of what Mick Gatto's career in mediation actually constituted. Whether the federal judge who called him a standover man and a gangster was describing the same reality as the contractors who paid him fees, or a different one. Whether the extortion model described in the 2026 CFMEU report represents what was happening in Victoria's construction industry, or a mischaracterization of legitimate dispute resolution. Those questions have never been resolved in a courtroom, because no courtroom has been asked to resolve them. The second question is harder. Mick Gatto survived the Melbourne Gangland killings. 30+ people died in that war. He shot the man who was arguably its most prolific killer, and was found to have done so lawfully. He then spent 2 decades operating in an industry known for its specific relationship with organized crime, and accumulated no subsequent convictions. At 70, his name appears in an Archibald Prize finalist portrait, in defamation proceedings in the Supreme Court, in an arrest that produced no charge. He is simultaneously a man who has never been convicted of anything serious since the 1980s, and a man whose name appears in more police intelligence files, royal commissions and investigative journalism than almost any figure in Victorian criminal history. For our community in Aotearoa, the Mick Gatto story connects to something this series has now documented across every investigation: the specific difficulty of separating legitimate influence from illegitimate pressure in industries where physical reputation and criminal networks intersect with ordinary commerce. The construction industry, the nightclub industry, the fruit market, the mediation table. What do you reckon? When a man is described by a federal judge as a standover man and a gangster, acquitted of murder by a jury, and never subsequently convicted of anything, which description is the true one? And what does your answer reveal about how you think the system should work?